one's watching, when your thoughts aren't yours anymore. These are not just stories, these are cries for help, recorded by those who listened too long. Turn up the volume, and pray you don't hear the same whisper tonight. When Claire and her husband Joel moved into the crumbling Victorian house in rural Vermont, it felt like stepping into a forgotten dream. The price was suspiciously low, but the realtor called it a fixer-upper with charm. Claire, an artist with a love for old architecture, convinced herself it just needed love. Joel just wanted peace after his job burned out. They got the keys in late October, right as the leaves began to fall. The first few days were uneventful. Dust, creaking floors, chilly air. Nothing they hadn't expected. But by the third night, Claire noticed something strange. She had stayed up late, sketching alone in the upstairs study. The walls were covered in faded, peeling wallpaper, a pale yellow with roses that had long since turned brown. As she traced a line across her paper, she paused. There it was. A sound, soft paper thin, a whisper. "Claire, behind you." She turned so fast the chair tipped slightly. Nothing, no shadow, no figure, no wind through the window, just silence. Her eyes scanned the room. The wallpaper near the ceiling had curled at one corner, slightly more than usual. She stared at it for a long time, waiting for movement that never came. She didn't tell Joel, not yet. But the next day, she found herself in that same room again, drawn to it. While cleaning, she noticed something odd. Beneath the wallpaper, just barely visible under a torn edge, was a layer of pitch black paint. It wasn't just dark, it was thick, almost sticky to the touch. She peeled back more wallpaper. The black continued, covering every inch beneath. That night, the whisper came again. "It's hiding." Claire bolted upright in bed, heart pounding. Joel snored softly beside her. The voice hadn't come from a dream. It had been in the room. She tiptoed to the study door. It was shut, but something scratched behind it, soft, slow, like fingernails. The next morning, Joel insisted it was probably rats or the house settling, but Claire's face had gone pale. Her hands shook when she poured her coffee. Joel offered to call an exterminator, but she wasn't convinced it was rats. Something else was in that room. Every night after, the whisper came back, always after midnight, always saying her name. Sometimes it laughed, low and rasping. Sometimes it said things that made her skin crawl. "He doesn't hear me, Claire, but you do." She stopped eating. Her sketches turned disturbing. Eyes with no pupils. A figure with twisted limbs reaching from the walls. She didn't remember drawing them. Joel begged her to rest. He thought she was unraveling. But she knew the truth. The house was alive. And something behind the wallpaper wanted out. Claire waited until Joel left for work before locking herself in the study. The whispering had become constant, no longer just at night. It followed her through the house. In the kitchen, in the hallway, sometimes it sounded like it was coming from inside the walls. She stood before the largest section of peeling wallpaper, the one where the voice had whispered her name most often. Her hands trembled as she pulled at the paper. It peeled away like old skin, revealing more of the slick, black surface beneath. The deeper she tore, the more the room seemed to darken, like the light couldn't reflect off that hideous color. Suddenly, she found something embedded in the black wall, a small indentation, a shape. She scraped at it with a palette knife until it popped free. A human tooth. Claire dropped it and stumbled back, choking on a scream. Beneath the surface, she saw faint outlines forming, faces pressed into the wall, mouths stretched open in silent agony, as though frozen mid-scream. She backed away, tears in her eyes. That night, she made Joel sleep downstairs. She told him she was working on a painting and didn't want to be disturbed. He didn't argue. He was too exhausted to care. Alone in the study, Claire sat on the floor, facing the wall. She felt it now, like a heartbeat, pulsing behind the blackness. And then the voice returned, louder, clearer. "Tear it all down. Claire, let me in." She didn't know why she obeyed. Something in her hands moved without command, ripping wallpaper, clawing at the surface until her nails bled. Her breath came in short gasps as the room seemed to vibrate with heat and sound. Behind the black paint was a door. Not a regular door. This one had no handle, no hinges, just a smooth rectangle carved into the wall, sealed shut with nails, old, rusted and bent, as if they had been forced in by someone desperate. A faint hum echoed from behind it. The smell of sulfur filled the air. She stared at the sealed door for hours, until her nose began to bleed and her hands ached from clenching. Downstairs, Joel awoke to a sound that froze his blood. Claire's voice, but distorted, echoing through the house, repeating the same phrase. "He sees you now." He ran upstairs, finding the study door wide open. The wallpaper was completely gone. The black wall pulsed like flesh. Claire stood in front of it, whispering things in a language he didn't recognize. When he touched her shoulder, she turned, but her eyes were wrong, entirely black. A smile played on her lips. "You shouldn't have come up here, Joel." The door in the wall cracked open, and something stepped through. It started when Marcus bought an old shortwave radio from a local flea market. The seller was an old man with milky eyes who said, "Only tune it at night." That's when the real voices come through. Marcus thought it was just junk, a vintage decoration for his shelf, but that night, curiosity got the better of him. He plugged it in, adjusted the dial, and let the static fill the room. At first it was harmless, weird music, distant chatter in languages he couldn't identify. But then, just past 3 a.m., he stumbled on a strange frequency. No music, no static, just breathing, then a voice. Low, raspy, almost mechanical, cut through. "Welcome back, Marcus. Room is open now." He jumped, spinning the dial in a panic. Nothing but static. Eventually, he turned the radio off and tried to convince himself he imagined it. But the next night, it happened again. Same time, same voice, "Don't look behind you." Marcus froze. He was alone in the room. He hadn't told anyone about the radio, not even his girlfriend, Nina. How did it know his name? He slowly turned around. Nothing. Shaken, he unplugged the radio and shoved it in his closet, but that didn't stop it. The voice continued. Even when the radio was unplugged, he would wake at 3:03 a.m., sharp, sweat pouring down his neck, and hear it. "The red room is ready. Just say yes." His dreams changed. He began seeing a small, windowless chamber, dim red lights, walls pulsing like muscle, and in the center, a single wooden chair, occupied by someone who looked like him, but wrong, eyes missing, mouth stitched. Then he woke up. Every night, at the exact same time. Nina noticed he was slipping. He became withdrawn, jittery. He covered the mirrors in the house, claiming he kept seeing movement that wasn't his. One night, she found him in the bathroom, holding a box cutter, whispering something under his breath. "They need to let me in." She took the radio and threw it in the trash. But the next morning, it was back on the shelf, clean, polished, and turned on, tuning itself. That night, Marcus didn't sleep. At 3 a.m., the radio clicked on by itself. The red light on the dial glowed brighter than usual. Then, the voice returned, clearer than ever. "You're already here, Marcus. We've been waiting." His vision blurred. The walls of his apartment seemed to pulse. A low droning hum filled the room as if the building itself was vibrating. And then, for the first time, Marcus answered, "Yes." The moment Marcus said yes, everything around him shifted. The room felt unnaturally silent. No city sounds, no hum from the fridge, even the ticking clock on the wall had stopped. The red glow from the radio pulsed like a heartbeat. Marcus blinked, and suddenly, he was no longer in his apartment. He stood barefoot on cold cement. A red light bathed the space around him, coming from nowhere and everywhere. The air smelled metallic like blood and burnt wires. The room matched his dreams exactly. No windows, no doors, just that same wooden chair. Someone was sitting in it. As Marcus approached, he saw it, a version of himself. But this Marcus was mutilated. Skin pale, lips gone, eyes black pits. The stitched mouth had torn slightly, as if it had been trying to scream for years. Its head slowly lifted, and then it whispered without opening its mouth. "I gave them my voice. Now it's your turn." Marcus stumbled back, but his body wouldn't obey. Something unseen gripped his ankles, pulling him closer to the chair. "You said yes. You entered. The broadcast can't stop." His mouth opened against his will. A static sound poured out of his throat. Loud, glitchy, unnatural. His tongue burned. It wasn't pain. It was erasure. Back in the apartment, Nina woke to the sound of Marcus's screams. But when she entered the room, it was empty. The radio sat silent, its red light off. No trace of Marcus. At first, she thought he left. But when she called his phone, she heard it ringing. Inside the closet, then she noticed something else. The faint sound of breathing coming from the radio, even though it was unplugged. Terrified, she went to the police. They searched the entire apartment, the neighborhood, even reviewed security footage. Marcus was seen entering the building, but he was never seen leaving. Case closed. Missing person. Weeks passed. Then one night, Nina woke to static playing softly in her bedroom. The radio was back, right beside her bed. A voice came through, a new voice. "Hello, Nina. Marcus wants to say something." She stared at it in horror as the static transformed into faint, agonized words. "Help, me." But it wasn't Marcus's voice anymore. It was hollow, empty, digitally broken, as if it was being forced through from somewhere else. Somewhere not meant for the living. Nina screamed and smashed the radio with a hammer. But the next night, it reassembled itself. Neat, polished, waiting. And every night since, it plays a new broadcast. Always at 3:03 a.m., always starting the same way. The Red Room is open now. When Caleb moved into his grandfather's old house in Elmsfield, he knew it needed work. The roof sagged, the floors creaked like something breathing beneath, and the attic had been sealed for decades. Locals avoided the place. Whispers about the whistling house. They called it every full moon. People claimed they heard a strange whistle from the attic window, even though no one lived there for years. Caleb didn't care. He was a pragmatist. Ghost stories were just that, stories, and he needed cheap housing. But strange things began within days. His tools went missing and reappeared in impossible places, like the freezer or under the bed. At night, he heard shifting above the ceiling, as if someone was crawling inside the attic. Once he even heard slow, rhythmic whistling right above his bedroom. 5 long notes. Low, shrill, always the same tune. He climbed up to the attic stairs once, but the door was bolted shut. He figured it was rats, or maybe the wood creaking from years of rot. But one night, things changed. He woke up at 2:14 a.m. to find his bedroom light on, not flickering, glowing steadily. He was sure he had turned it off, but more disturbing was what he saw next. Dusty footprints, leading from the corner of his room to the attic stairs. Bare feet, large, human, and they weren't his. They vanished right where the bolted attic door began. The next morning, Caleb removed the bolts and finally pried it open. Dust poured down like ash. The smell of mildew and something older, like dried blood and forgotten time, spilled out. Inside, the attic was huge and dark. Only a single broken window let in daylight. But in the center of the room was something he hadn't expected. A mirror. Tall, ornate, and old. The frame was blackened with age. The glass was fogged, but not broken. As he stepped closer, something felt wrong. Like the room didn't breathe right. The air was heavier and cold. He looked into the mirror. At first it just showed his reflection. Then something moved behind him in the glass. He spun around. No one was there. He looked back. The figure was closer now. It wasn't him. It looked like him, but gaunter, expressionless, and its mouth was slightly open, whistling that same 5-note tune. Caleb backed away, but the figure in the mirror didn't. It just kept walking forward, closing the distance, step by step, whistling all the while. Then it stopped, pressed its palm to the glass, and the mirror cracked slightly, like something inside wanted out. Caleb slammed the attic door shut and rebolted it, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. But all night, he couldn't sleep, because from above, the whistling continued, slow and taunting. The same 5 notes, played over and over again. By morning, the attic was silent, but something had changed in the house. The walls felt colder. The mirrors in the hallway began fogging up on their own, even without heat or steam. Worse, they would sometimes rattle, as if someone on the other side was tapping lightly. Still, Caleb stayed. He tried to rationalize it all. Stress, mold, sleep deprivation. But deep down, he knew something had followed him from that attic mirror. It wasn't until he invited his cousin Noah over that things escalated. Noah was skeptical of ghosts. He laughed at Caleb's stories and insisted on going up to the attic himself. Caleb warned him, begged him not to open the door again, but Noah didn't listen. He went up and didn't come back down for 10 minutes. When he finally did, his face was pale. He didn't say a word. He just grabbed his keys and left. That night, Caleb received a voicemail from Noah. It was almost all static, but at the end, there was one clear sound. That same 5-note whistle. Noah wouldn't return his calls after that. The next morning, Caleb found something new scratched into the inside of his bedroom mirror. "Let me in." He covered every reflective surface in the house with sheets. The TV, the faucets, even his phone screen, all draped in cloth or turned face down. He knew now, the thing in the mirror was real. It wasn't just mimicking him. It wanted to take his place. But the more he avoided mirrors, the more it tried to reach him. The whistling grew louder, not just from the attic, but from behind every covered surface. One night, during a power outage, Caleb lit a candle and caught a glimpse of movement in the turned-off TV screen. It wasn't his reflection. It was the thing again, emaciated, grinning wide, now pressing its face against the inside of the glass like it was inches away. Whispering now, not whistling. He didn't wait. He packed a bag and fled the house. He never went back. To this day, Caleb swears he never saw the figure again until recently. While walking past a pawn shop downtown, something in the window caught his eye. A familiar mirror. Tall, ornate, its frame blackened with age. As he turned to walk away, he heard it again. 5 notes, low, shrill, followed by a whisper. "You looked once, you'll look again."